The golden haze of a Manhattan summer afternoon filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Ferrer family's penthouse, casting long, delicate shadows across the marble floors. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine from a vase on the dining table, but a storm was brewing beneath the elegance of the Upper East Side apartment. Miles Ferrer, a young black woman with eyes that held fire and fragility, stood at the kitchen counter, her hands moving rhythmically as she polished the mahogany table. Each swipe of the cloth was deliberate, a quiet rebellion against the chaos threatening to erupt within her heart. Her skin glowed under the soft light, a testament to her strength, though her shoulders sagged slightly, weighed down by an unspoken burden. Miles was no stranger to the weight of expectations. As the eldest daughter of the Ferrer family, she had once danced through life with the grace of a woman who knew her worth. A marketing graduate from Columbia University, she had navigated the glittering world of New York's elite confidently, her laughter echoing at galas in the Hamptons, her voice commanding attention in boardrooms. But she was invisible here in the sanctuary of her family's home. With its crystal chandeliers and imported art, the penthouse felt less like a home and more like a stage, where she played the role of the overlooked sister. As she worked, the faint hum of jazz drifted from the living room, a melody that should have soothed, but only heightened the tension. Miles's thoughts were a tangle of memories, moments when her achievements were eclipsed by her younger sister Celine. She recalled the day she won a scholarship to Columbia, her heart swelling with pride, only to hear her mother Jenna gush over Celine's latest dance recital. The sting of that memory lingered sharp and unyielding as she scrubbed a non-existent stain from the table. The soft click of heels on the hardwood floor broke her reverie. Miles glanced up to find Celine standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the golden light. Celine's auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes, sharp as a winter wind, glinted with barely concealed anger. She crossed her arms, her designer dress clinging to her frame, starkly contrasting Miles's simple jeans and blouse. The air between them crackled, charged with years of unspoken resentment. "So, that's why you're so quiet today," Celine said, her voice cool, but laced with venom. "You're playing the innocent martyr again, aren't you?" Miles paused, her hand tightening around the damp cloth. She wiped her hands slowly, deliberately, buying time to steady her racing heart. "What are you talking about, Celine?" she asked, her tone measured but tinged with weariness. "Don't act like you don't know," Celine snapped, stepping closer. Her heels echoed like accusations in the quiet kitchen. "Mom told me they found out about last night. Someone saw me at that Soho party kissing that guy. And guess who they think spilled the beans? You." Miles's breath caught, but she refused to let her emotions betray her. She turned to face her sister, her dark eyes steady despite the storm within. "I didn't say anything," she said firmly, her voice low but resolute. "I'm not the one who goes around spreading gossip." Celine's laugh was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "Oh, please, Miles. You're always watching, always judging. You can't stand that I'm the one they notice and love. You're just jealous." The word jealous struck like a match, igniting a fire in Miles's chest. She straightened her shoulders, squaring, as she met Celine's gaze. "Jealous? You think I'm jealous of your reckless choices? If you didn't want Mom and Dad to know what you're doing, maybe you should learn some shame." Celine's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "Shame that's rich coming from you. You act like you're perfect, but all you do is tear me down to make yourself feel better. You can't stand that I'm the favorite and the one who shines." Miles's lips parted, a bitter smile tugging at the corners. "You've been saying that since we were kids, Celine. Every time you mess up, it's my fault. Every time you get caught, I'm the villain. But you know what? I'm tired of your excuses." Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with the weight of years spent swallowing her pain. Celine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You're tired. Try living in your shadow, Miles. Try knowing you're always there, ready to point out my flaws, no matter what I do. I want to live my life to love who I want. Why can't you let me be happy?" Happy Miles' voice rose a rare crack in her composure. "You think sneaking around with a guy who's already taken his happiness? I care about you, Celine, even if you don't believe it. But every time I try to help, you push me away." "Help!" Celine scoffed, her eyes flashing. "You call your constant lectures help? You're not my mother, Miles. You're a bitter sister who can't stand seeing me win." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Miles felt the familiar ache in her chest, which came from being misunderstood and cast as her family's antagonist. She opened her mouth to respond, but footsteps interrupted her. Jenna, their mother, appeared in the doorway, her elegant frame draped in a silk dress, her expression a mix of exhaustion and disapproval. "What's going on here?" Jenna asked, her voice sharp as she surveyed the scene. Her eyes lingered on Miles, as if already assuming her guilt. Celine's demeanor shifted instantly, her voice softening into a plaintive tone. "Mom, she's at it again. She's spreading lies about me, saying I was with that guy last night." Miles's heart sank. She shook her head, her voice steady but laced with pain. "That's not true, Mom. I didn't say anything. I saw what happened, but I kept it to myself." Jenna's gaze hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Miles, why do you always have to stir up trouble? Can't you just let your sister be?" The words cut deeper than Miles expected, a fresh wound on an already scarred heart. She looked at her mother, searching for a glimmer of understanding, but found none. "I'm not stirring anything," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I'm just trying to do what's right. But no matter what I say, you never listen to me." Jenna sighed, her shoulders slumping as if Miles's words were a burden she couldn't bear. "If you'd stop being so confrontational, maybe we could have peace in this house." Miles felt the weight of those words settle over her heavy as the city skyline outside. She turned back to the table, her hands resuming their work, but her heart was elsewhere, lost in memories of a time when she believed her family saw her, truly saw her. As a child, she had danced with Celine in their Harlem brownstone, teaching her the steps to a hip-hop routine, their laughter filling the air. But even then, Celine had turned it into a competition, determined to outshine her sister. Miles had let it go, hoping love would bridge their gap. Standing in this pristine kitchen, she realized that hope had been fragile, shattered by years of favoritism. As Celine stormed out, her heels clicking like a metronome, Miles closed her eyes, letting the jazz melody wash over her. She imagined herself elsewhere, perhaps on a rooftop in Brooklyn, where the city's pulse matched her own, where she could be free from the weight of her family's judgment. But for now, she was here, tethered to a home that felt more like a cage, soft but insistent. The question lingered in her mind. How much longer can I stay? The sun had dipped below the Manhattan skyline, painting the Ferrer penthouse in hues of amber and violet. The dining room, with its long mahogany table and crystal candelabras, was a portrait of elegance, but the atmosphere was anything but serene. Miles sat at one end, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the plate of roasted lamb before her. Across from her, Celine twirled a glass of wine, her movements deliberate, each gesture a silent challenge. Jenna, at the head of the table, tried to maintain an air of normalcy, while Manuel, their father, cut into his meal with mechanical precision, his silence louder than any words. The clink of silverware against porcelain filled the room, a fragile veneer over the tension that simmered beneath. Miles felt it in her bones, the unspoken accusations, the weight of being the family's scapegoat. She had spent the day replaying her earlier confrontation with Celine, each word a needle in her heart. The memory of her sister's venomous tone lingered, but so did the flicker of hope that tonight perhaps they could share a meal without conflict. That hope, however, was as fleeting as the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Jenna, ever the peacemaker in appearance, if not in action, broke the silence. "Miles, why don't you add more to your plate?" she said, her voice warm, but tinged with an edge of expectation. She pushed a platter of grilled vegetables toward her daughter, her smile strained. "You've barely eaten." Miles glanced at the platter, her appetite dulled by the day's wait. "I'm fine, Mom," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She kept her eyes down, avoiding the scrutiny she knew was coming. Celine's laugh cut through the quiet, sharp and mocking. "Fine. You're barely touching your food, Miles. What's wrong? Too busy plotting your next lecture for me?" Miles's fingers tightened around her fork, the metal cool against her palm. She lifted her gaze, meeting Celine's taunting eyes. "I didn't say anything about you, Celine. Maybe if you stopped assuming the worst, we could have a normal dinner." Normal? Celine's voice dripped with sarcasm, her wineglass pausing mid-air. "You mean a dinner where you don't criticize every move I make? I'm just trying to live my life, Miles. Why do you always have to make it about you?" The air grew heavier, the room shrinking under the weight of their words. Jenna's fork clattered against her plate, her patience fraying. "Celine, that's enough. We're eating. Let's keep this civil." But Celine's eyes gleamed with defiance. She leaned forward, her voice low but piercing. "Civil? Tell that to your perfect daughter over there. She's the one who can't let anything go. Always so sensitive, always so dramatic." Miles's heart pounded, each word a blow to the fragile armor she had built. She set her fork down, her hands trembling slightly. "Dramatic. You're the one who turns everything into a fight." "I didn't start this, Celine. You did the moment you decided to throw accusations at me." Manuel finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "Miles, stop," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're making this worse." The words hit Miles like a physical force, knocking the breath from her lungs. She turned to her father, searching his face for a trace of support, but found only detachment. "Worse," she repeated, her voice breaking. "She's the one who started it, Dad. Why am I always the one you tell to stop?" Jenna sighed, her eyes flickering with frustration. "Because you keep responding, Miles. If you'd stay calm, we wouldn't have these arguments." Miles's chest tightened, the familiar ache of being unheard swelling within her. She looked around the table at the faces of the family she had once believed would always stand by her. Memories flooded back, moments when she had poured her heart into pleasing them, only to be overshadowed by Celine's charm. She remembered the summer she organized a charity event in Harlem, hoping to make her parents proud, only to hear them praise Celine's latest performance at a Lincoln Center gala. The realization washed over her, cold and unrelenting in their eyes. She would always be the one who fell short. "I'm not the problem here," Miles said, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening to spill. "I've tried to be the sister you wanted, Celine. I've tried to be the daughter you could be proud of, Mom, Dad. But no matter what I do, it's never enough. You always choose her." Celine's lips curled into a cold smile. "Admit it, Miles. You're just bitter because you're not the star of this family. You never were." The words were a dagger twisting in Miles's heart. She pushed her chair back, the screech of wood against marble echoing in the silence. "You know what, Celine, keep your spotlight. I'm done trying to prove myself to any of you." She stood, her eyes blazing with a mix of pain and resolve. "I grew up in this house, but it's never felt like home. Not for me." Jenna's voice was sharp, cutting through the haze. "Miles, sit down. "You're being ridiculous." But Miles was already moving her steps purposeful as she left the dining room. The city lights blurred through the windows, a kaleidoscope of dreams she had once chased. She paused in the hallway, her hand resting on the cool glass of a framed family photo. In it, she and Celine were children laughing in a Central Park meadow, their faces alight with innocence. That moment felt like a lifetime ago, a memory of a bond that had long since frayed. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of the evening settle over her. Outside, the city hummed with life taxis, honking street musicians, playing the pulse of New York, a constant reminder of possibility. Miles longed to lose herself in that rhythm, to escape the suffocating confines of her family's judgment. But as she stood alone in the shadowed hallway, she felt the stirrings of something new, a quiet determination to find a place where she could be seen, where her voice would matter. The penthouse, with all its opulence, was no longer her sanctuary. It was time to find her own. The morning sun rose over the Upper East Side, its golden rays glinting off the sleek facades of brownstones and high-rises, but for Miles Ferrer, the light brought no warmth. She stood in the driveway of her family's penthouse, her hands gripping the keys to her silver BMW, a gift from a life that now felt like a distant dream. Her heart pounded a drumbeat of frustration and sorrow as she tried to anchor herself against the storm of the previous night's dinner. The words exchanged at the table, sharp-cutting and unrelenting, still echoed in her mind, each a reminder of her place in the Ferrer family. The unseen, the unheard, the perpetually blamed. Miles's dark eyes were clouded with exhaustion, framed by lashes that caught the morning light. Her skin, a rich ebony that glowed with resilience, bore the faint traces of sleeplessness. She wore a tailored blazer and jeans, a nod to the poised woman she once was. But beneath the polished exterior, her soul was fraying. The memory of Celine's accusations, her mother's dismissive tone, and her father's silence weighed heavily, pressing against her chest like a stone. She longed to escape, to drive through the bustling streets of Manhattan and lose herself in the city's relentless rhythm. But fate had other plans. As she opened the car door, the sharp click of heels on pavement halted her. Celine emerged from the penthouse, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, and her designer dress starkly contrasted with the raw anger in her eyes. She stormed toward Miles, her steps purposeful, her voice a blade slicing through the morning calm. "You think you can just walk away after last night?" She spat, her words dripping with venom. "You always have to make everything about you, don't you?" Miles turned, her posture stiffening as she faced her sister. "I'm not doing this again, Celine," she said, her voice low but steady, each syllable laced with the weariness of a battle fought too many times. "I'm leaving. Let's call it a truce for once." A truce? Celine's laugh was cold, a bitter echo that seemed to mock the very idea. "You don't get to play the victim, Miles. You're the one who's always pointing fingers, always trying to make me look bad. I heard what people were saying about the party in Soho and about me, and I know you're behind it." Miles's fingers tightened around the keys, the metal biting her palm. She took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. "I told you I didn't say anything. I saw you with that guy Celine, but I kept it to myself. Maybe you wouldn't have to worry about people talking if you weren't so reckless." Celine's eyes flashed, her face contorting with fury. "Reckless? You're the reckless one and always meddling in my life. You can't stand that I'm living mine, while you're stuck being the perfect daughter nobody cares about." The words stung, but Miles refused to let them break her. She opened the car door, her movements deliberate, but Celine wasn't done. She stepped in front of the car, suddenly, recklessly planting herself firmly in the driveway. Her arms were crossed, her chin lifted in defiance. "Go ahead, Miles," she taunted, her voice trembling with rage. "Drive. Show everyone what a great sister you are." Miles froze, her heart racing. "Celine, move," she said, her voice firm, but laced with a plea. "This isn't a game." But Celine's eyes gleamed with a dangerous mix of anger and desperation. "I'm not moving. You want to leave? Then prove you're as heartless as I think you are. Drive." The world seemed to slow, the air thick with the weight of their shared history. Miles's mind flashed to a memory, a summer day in Central Park, when she and Celine were children, chasing each other through the grass, their laughter intertwining like the notes of a forgotten song. She had always wanted to protect her sister and be the anchor Celine could rely on. But now, standing in this driveway, she saw only a stranger consumed by a rivalry Miles had never understood. She slid into the driver's seat, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. "Celine, I'm serious. Get out of the way," she said, her voice breaking. But Celine stood firm, her gaze unyielding, daring her to act. Miles's foot hovered over the pedal, her mind whirling with fear and frustration. She pressed lightly on the gas, intending only to inch forward to scare Celine into moving. But in a moment of panic, her foot slipped, pressing the accelerator instead of the brake. The car lurched forward, the front bumper grazing Celine's legs. It wasn't a hard impact, but it was enough. Celine stumbled, her body hitting the pavement with a dull thud, her head grazing the concrete as she fell unconscious. Miles's scream tore through the morning air, raw and desperate. She opened the car door, her legs shaking, as she dropped to her knees beside her sister. "Celine! Oh God! Celine! Wake up!" Her hands hovered over Celine's still form, afraid to touch, afraid to make things worse. The world blurred around her, the sound of her heartbeat drowning out the distant hum of the city. Neighbors emerged from their brownstones' voices, a cacophony of shock and accusation. "She hit her!" someone shouted. "Call an ambulance!" Miles barely registered the words, her focus locked on Celine's pale face, her chest's faint rise and fall, offering a sliver of hope. Jenna and Manuel burst from the penthouse, their faces etched with horror. Jenna's scream pierced the air as she dropped her phone, rushing to Celine's side. "What did you do?" she cried, her voice breaking as she cradled her youngest daughter. "Miles, what did you do to her?" "It was an accident." Miles pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She stood in front of the car. "Mom, I didn't mean to. I was trying to stop." But her words fell on deaf ears. Manuel's face was a mask of fury as he dialed for help, his voice sharp as he barked orders. "Ambulance now," he shouted, then turned to Miles, his eyes cold. "You're no daughter of mine if this is what you do to your sister." The words were a knife twisting deep in Miles's heart. She stood frozen, her hands stained with the dust of the pavement as the ambulance arrived, its sirens a wail that echoed her despair. At Mount Sinai Hospital, Miles sat in the waiting room, her blouse streaked with dirt, her palms still bearing traces of Celine's fall. The sterile white walls closed around her, and the hum of fluorescent lights was a cruel reminder of her isolation. She didn't know how long she sat there. Each minute felt like a lifetime. Jenna appeared, her blazer hastily thrown on, her eyes red and swollen. Manuel stood behind her, his silence a condemnation. Miles stood, her voice trembling as she asked, "How's Celine?" Jenna's response was a sharp and resounding slap that echoed through the hallway. Miles staggered, her cheek burning, but the pain in her heart was far worse. "You're heartless!" Jenna hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You were behind the wheel, Miles. You did this to your sister." "I didn't mean to," Miles whispered, her voice breaking. She stood there, Mom. She wouldn't move. "Enough." Jenna snapped, her eyes blazing. "No more excuses. Your sister is in there with a neck brace, a gash on her forehead, and you have the nerve to make excuses." Manuel stepped forward, his expression unyielding. He dropped an envelope at Miles's feet, its contents spilling across the floor. Credit cards, her driver's license, the keys to her car, a checkbook. "This is the end, Miles," he said, his voice cold. "Your accounts are closed. Your car is gone. You're no longer part of this family." Miles stared at the scattered remnants of her old life, her breath catching in her throat. "You're cutting me off," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Because of an accident. Because you've always chosen her." Jenna's eyes hardened. "Leave, Miles. Don't come back. You're not our daughter anymore." The words shattered something deep within Miles, but as she looked at her parents, she saw not a home, but a void. She bent down, picking up a single credit card, its plastic surface cold against her fingers. With a trembling hand, she tossed it into a nearby trash can, a silent rebellion against the life she was leaving behind. "One day," she said, her voice steady despite her tears, "you'll see the truth. You'll see who was really trying to hold this family together." She turned and walked out of the hospital, the city's pulse a distant hum against the roar of her grief. The streets of Manhattan stretched before her, vast and unforgiving, but within her burned a spark of defiance. She had nothing, no money, no home, no family, but she had herself, and that, she vowed, would be enough. The Brooklyn skyline shimmered under the late summer stars, its jagged silhouette a stark contrast to the polished elegance of Manhattan. Miles Ferrer stood on the rooftop of a modest brownstone, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea, the steam curling into the night air like a whisper of hope. The city's heartbeat pulsed below car horns, laughter, the distant saxophone wail, but the world felt quiet for Miles, as if holding its breath. Her life, once a tapestry of galas and penthouse views, had unraveled in a single day, leaving her with nothing but a backpack containing 4 outfits, a nearly empty wallet, and a phone with a disconnected line. Aubrey, her lifelong friend, had opened her small Brooklyn apartment to Miles, offering a folding bed in the corner of her cluttered living room. The space was a far cry from the Ferrer penthouse, with its mismatched furniture and peeling wallpaper, but it was a sanctuary, a place where Miles could breathe without the weight of her family's judgment. Aubrey, with her warm brown eyes and infectious laugh, had always been Miles's anchor, the one who saw her when no one else did. Tonight, as they sat on the rooftop, Aubrey's presence was a balm to Miles's wounded heart. "You're quieter than usual," Aubrey said, her voice soft but probing as she leaned back against the ledge. Her dreadlocks swayed in the breeze, catching the glow of the streetlights. "Want to talk about it?" Miles's lips curved into a faint smile, but didn't reach her eyes. "What's there to talk about? I lost everything, Aubrey. My family, my home, my life. All because of a moment I didn't mean to happen." Aubrey reached out her hand, resting gently on Miles's arm. "You didn't lose everything, Miles. You've got you. And that's more than enough." Miles's gaze drifted to the city below, her mind replaying the hospital scene, the slap from her mother, the cold finality of her father's words. She thought of Celine, lying in that sterile bed, and the guilt that gnawed at her, even though she knew the accident wasn't entirely her fault. "I keep thinking about her," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I keep seeing her face and how she looked at me before falling. I wanted to protect her, Aubrey. I always have. But she's made it so hard." Aubrey nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know, babe. But you can't carry her choices. Celine's been competing with you since you were kids. Remember when you taught her that dance routine for the school talent show? She practiced for weeks, not because she loved it, but because she wanted to outshine you." Miles's laugh was soft, tinged with sorrow. "Yeah, and when she won first place, Mom and Dad acted like I didn't even exist. I thought if I kept trying, they'd see me. But they never did." Aubrey squeezed her arm, her voice firm. They didn't see you, but I do. And you're not done, Miles. You're just starting over. The words sparked something in Miles, a flicker of resolve buried beneath her grief. She took a sip of her tea, the warmth grounding her. Starting over, she murmured, testing the words. I don't even know where to begin. Aubrey's eyes lit up, a mischievous glint dancing in them. Actually, I might have an idea. There's a job opening at a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. The Hidalgo family, they're big in the furniture business. They need an all-around housekeeper. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. Free room, free food, decent pay. What do you say? Miles's heart sank at the word housekeeper. Miles Ferrer, who had once organized charity galas and negotiated deals with New York's elite, reduced to cleaning someone else's home. The thought was a bitter pill, but as she looked at Aubrey's hopeful face, she realized she had no other options. Housekeeper. She repeated, her voice heavy. I have a marketing degree from Columbia, Aubrey. I was the student body president. I spoke at conferences. And now, this. Aubrey's expression softened, but her voice was steady. I know it's not what you dreamed of, but dreams change, Miles. You need to eat to survive. This job, it's a start. You don't have to do it forever, but you must do it now. Miles closed her eyes, her mind flashing to the nights she'd spent dancing under the stars at rooftop parties, her laughter mingling with the city's pulse. She had been a woman of ambition, of fire, but now she was adrift, her future a blank canvas. She considered the alternative, returning to her family, begging for forgiveness she didn't owe. The idea was unbearable. Okay, she said finally, her voice resolute. I'll do it. Aubrey's grin was wide, her relief palpable. That's my girl. I'll call my contact tomorrow. You'll start at the Hidalgo mansion in a few days. The next morning, Miles stood before the gates of the Hidalgo estate in Greenwich. A sprawling mansion of white stone and ivy, its marble fountain gleaming in the sunlight. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and possibility, but Miles's heart was heavy with trepidation. She wore a simple blouse and black slacks borrowed from Aubrey, and her rubber shoes starkly contrasted with the designer heels she once favored. Her backpack, slung over one shoulder, held the remnants of her old life: 4 outfits, a wallet with a few dollars, and a journal where she poured her thoughts. A woman in a crisp uniform approached, clipboard in hand. Miles Ferrer, she asked, her tone professional but kind. I'm Lanny, head of the staff. Follow me. I'll introduce you to the owner. As they walked through the mansion's grand foyer, Miles felt the weight of her new reality settle over her. The crystal chandelier above cast prisms of light across the marble floors, and the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. She had once been a guest in places like this, sipping champagne and charming investors. Now she was the help, her steps echoing in a foreign and familiar space. Lanny led her to a spiral staircase, where Regina Hidalgo descended, a woman in her early 50s, with an air of quiet authority. Her black dress hugged her frame, and her eyes, sharp and assessing, studied Miles from head to toe. You're Miles Ferrer, Regina said, removing her reading glasses. You don't look like the usual staff. Miles straightened, her voice steady despite her nerves. I'm a quick learner, ma'am. I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. Regina's lips twitched, a hint of amusement in her gaze. We'll see about that. This isn't a place for delicate egos. You'll be in charge of laundry linens and attending to guests in the living area. Understood. Yes, ma'am, Miles replied, her head dipping in a gesture of respect. Good, Regina said, her tone clipped. Lanny, show her to her room. She starts at dawn. As Lanny led her away, Miles felt the weight of her new life settle into her bones. The room assigned to her was small but clean, with a single bed and a window overlooking the estate's gardens. She set her backpack down, her fingers brushing against the journal inside. That night, she wrote her first entry in this new chapter. I am not my past. I am not my pain. I am Miles, and I will find my way. The next morning, Miles woke before dawn, the air cool against her skin as she dressed in her uniform. The laundry room was her first task, a cavernous space filled with the hum of machines and the scent of detergent. She plunged her hands into soapy water, scrubbing bedsheets with a determination that belied her aching muscles. Each motion was a rebellion against the life she'd lost, a promise to herself that she would endure. As she worked, the sliding door to the garden opened, and a figure stepped inside. Miles's breath caught as she looked up, her hands freezing in the suds. Kian Hidalgo stood before her. His blonde hair tousled, his blue eyes gleaming with a familiar mischief. He was the son of the house, a man whose smile had once set her heart ablaze during their college days at Columbia. Miles, he said, his voice a mix of surprise and delight. What are you doing here? Miles's heart raced, a flood of memories threatening to overwhelm her. With his easy charm and relentless optimism, Kian had been her first love, her partner in late-night study sessions and rooftop dances. They had parted ways when he left for London, chasing his dreams in finance, while she stayed behind, unable to face a long-distance relationship. Now he was standing in the laundry room of his family's mansion, his presence a reminder of a life she had tried to forget. I work here, she said, her voice steady but guarded. She turned back to the sheets, her hands moving with purpose. Don't make this harder than it already is. Kian's laugh was soft, warm, like a melody she hadn't heard in years. Still the same Miles, all fire and no nonsense. I'm not here to mess with you. I'm just shocked. You in my house washing my sheets. Fate's got a sense of humor. Miles's lips twitched, but she kept her eyes on her work. Fate can keep its jokes. I'm just trying to survive. Kian stepped closer, his voice softening. You're doing more than surviving, Miles. You're here standing tall, even after everything. That's not nothing. The words stirred something in her, a spark of warmth she hadn't felt in days. But she pushed it down, focusing on the rhythm of her task. Kian lingered for a moment, his presence a quiet promise before he turned and left, leaving Miles alone with her thoughts. As she folded the damp sheets, she felt a flicker of hope, fragile but persistent, that this new beginning, however humble, might lead her to a place where she could finally be seen. The Hidalgo mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, stood like a monument to timeless elegance, its white stone walls kissed by the soft glow of dawn. Inside, the air was thick with lavender polish and freshly laundered linens, a quiet symphony of order that Miles Ferrer had come to orchestrate. Each morning, she rose before the sun, her hands calloused from scrubbing her heart, a fragile mosaic of resolve and remembrance. The woman who once commanded boardrooms and dazzled at Hampton's galas was now a housekeeper, her world reduced to the rhythm of chores, yet within that simplicity, she was beginning to find herself. Miles moved through the mansion's grand hallways, her rubber shoes whispering against the polished marble. Her uniform, a plain black blouse and slacks, was a stark contrast to the designer dresses she once wore, but it felt like armor shielding her from the ghosts of her past. Her ebony skin glowed under the chandelier's prisms, her eyes a deep, soulful brown, holding a fire that refused to be extinguished. She carried a tray of cleaning supplies, her movements precise, but her mind wandered to the life she had lost, the penthouse in Manhattan, the laughter of her family, the dreams she had woven under the city's glittering skyline. She spent most of her days in the laundry room, her sanctuary and battlefield. The hum of the washing machine was a constant companion, its steady drone a counterpoint to the chaos of her thoughts. As she folded crisp white sheets, She allowed herself a moment of reflection, her fingers tracing the fabric, as if it held the secrets of her heart. She thought of the accident, the way Celine's body had crumpled to the pavement, the sting of her mother's slap in the hospital hallway. Those memories were sharp-cutting, but they no longer defined her. She was learning to let go, to carve out a space for herself in this new world. In this quiet moment, Kian Hidalgo appeared as sudden as a summer storm. He leaned against the doorway, his blonde hair catching the morning light, his blue eyes twinkling with a mischief that was both infuriating and familiar. Kian, the son of the house, was a man who wore his charm like a second skin, and his easy smile was a reminder of their college days at Columbia. He was a vision of casual elegance in a white shirt and faded jeans, his designer sunglasses dangling from his fingers. "Missed me?" he asked, his voice a velvet tease that stirred something deep within Miles. She froze, her hands buried in the folds of a sheet, her heart betraying her with a quickened beat. "Kian," she said, her tone clipped but soft. "I'm working. Don't you have somewhere else to be?" He chuckled, stepping into the room, his presence filling the space like a melody she couldn't ignore. "Right. Here's just fine," he said, his eyes scanning her with a warmth that made her skin tingle. "You look different, Miles. Stronger somehow. But still that fire in your eyes." Miles turned away, focusing on the sheet, her fingers trembling slightly. "Don't flatter me, Kian. I'm not the girl you knew in college. That Miles is gone." "Is she?" Kian's voice was gentle, probing as he moved closer. "Because I see her right here folding sheets like she's about to conquer the world. You've always been unstoppable, Miles." Her breath caught, and she glanced at him, her defenses wavering. She remembered their nights together, dancing under the stars on a Harlem rooftop, their laughter mingling with the city's pulse. They had been young, reckless, bound by a love that felt invincible until Kian left for London, chasing his dreams in finance, and she chose to stay, unable to face the uncertainty of distance. The memory was a bittersweet ache, one she had buried deep, but could never fully escape. "I'm just trying to get through the day," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with vulnerability. "I don't need you stirring up the past." Kian's smile faded, replaced by a sincerity that caught her off guard. "I'm not here to hurt you, Miles. I'm just glad you're here, in my house of all places. It's like fate's giving us a second chance." "Fate." Miles's laugh was sharp, but softened as she met his gaze. "Fate took everything from me, Kian. My family, my home, my pride. I'm not sure I believe in second chances anymore." He stepped closer, his voice low, intimate. "Then let me believe for both of us. You're not alone, Miles. Not here." The words hung in the air, a fragile thread connecting their past to this uncertain present. Miles felt a warmth spread through her, but she pushed it away, returning to her work. Kian lingered for a moment, then left, his footsteps fading into the hum of the mansion. Miles allowed herself a small, secret smile as she folded the last sheet. Kian's presence was a complication she didn't need, but it was also a reminder that she was still capable of feeling something other than pain. Days turned into weeks, and Miles settled into the rhythm of her new life. She learned to navigate the mansion's endless corridors, anticipate Regina Hidalgo's exacting standards, and find solace in the quiet moments between tasks. But Kian was a constant presence, his teasing smiles and gentle gestures weaving into her routine. He brought her coffee in the mornings, left notes tucked into her cleaning supplies, each a small act of kindness that chipped away at her walls. One afternoon, as she polished the silver in the dining room, Miles hummed a tune from their college days, a jazz melody they had danced to under the city lights. She paused, her hand stilling on the candelabra as a memory surfaced. Kian spinning her on a rooftop, his hands warm against her waist, their laughter a symphony against the Manhattan skyline. The memory was a pang sharp and sweet, and she wondered if she could ever reclaim that version of herself. Lanny, the head of the staff, interrupted her thoughts, her clipboard ever present. "You're doing well, Miles," she said, her tone warm but professional. Mrs. Hidalgo's noticed. "Keep it up, and you might win her over." Miles nodded, her heart lifting at the praise. "Thank you, Lanny. I'm just trying to keep my head down." Lanny's eyes softened. "You're doing more than that. You've got a fire in you, girl. Don't let it go out." The words stayed with Miles as she moved through her tasks, a quiet reminder that she was more than her circumstances. She began to keep a journal, scribbling her thoughts in the quiet of her small room each night. "I am not my mistakes," she wrote. "I am not my family's rejection. I am Miles, and I am enough." Writing was a lifeline, a way to reclaim her voice in a world that had tried to silence her. But the past was never far away. As she swept the grand staircase one evening, laughter from the living room drew her attention. She peeked through the doorway, her heart catching at the sight of Kian playing cards with his cousins, his smile as bright as ever. She was back in college, momentarily watching him charm a room with his effortless grace. She turned away, her broom a steady anchor, but the ache in her chest lingered, a reminder of what might have been. As the weeks passed, Miles found a strange comfort in her work. The act of cleaning, of bringing order to chaos, was a metaphor for her own journey. She was rebuilding herself one task at a time, and though the road was long, she was beginning to see the light at the end. The Hidalgo mansion was a world unto itself, a labyrinth of opulence, where every corner held a story, every surface reflected care. For Miles Ferrer, it was both a refuge and a crucible, where she forged a new version of herself from the ashes of her past. The early autumn light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the hardwood floors, and Miles moved through them with a quiet grace, her hands deft as she arranged fresh roses in the main hall. Her uniform was crisp, her movements precise, but her heart was a canvas of emotions, hope, sorrow, and a burgeoning strength that surprised even her. Her days were a tapestry of tasks, polishing silver, folding linens, serving guests, with a smile that masked the turmoil within. Each chore was a step toward reclaiming her dignity, a silent rebellion against the life that had cast her out. Her ebony skin glowed under the soft light, her eyes a deep well of resilience, reflecting a determination that had grown stronger with each passing week. She was no longer the woman who had stood trembling in the hospital hallway, her family's rejection a weight she could not bear. She was Miles, and she was learning to stand tall. But the mansion was not without its complications. With his golden hair and disarming smile, Kian Hidalgo was a constant presence, his teasing banter a melody that soothed and unsettled her. He appeared at the most unexpected moments, offering a glass of water during a long shift, leaving a daisy on her cleaning tray, with a note that read, "You make this place brighter." Each gesture was a thread weaving a connection she wasn't sure she could trust. She had loved him once fiercely, in the days when they danced through Harlem's vibrant nights, their dreams as boundless as the city itself. But love had been a risk she couldn't afford then, and she wasn't sure she could afford it now. One crisp morning, as Miles swept the veranda overlooking the estate's sprawling gardens, Bella, a younger housekeeper with a penchant for gossip, joined her. Bella's eyes sparkled with mischief, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "So, Miles," she began, leaning against her broom, "what's the deal with you and Sir Kian? Everyone's talking about the way he looks at you." Miles's cheeks warmed, but she kept her gaze on the broom, her strokes steady. "There's no deal, Bella. He's just Kian, annoying as always." Bella laughed, her curls bouncing. Annoying girl. He's smitten. I saw him bring you that coffee yesterday, all smiles and charm. And don't get me started on that Daisy. You can't tell me there's nothing there. Miles sighed, her heart a tangle of longing and caution. We knew each other in college. She admitted, her voice soft, almost lost in the rustle of leaves. We were something once. But that was a long time ago. Bella's eyes widened, her grin infectious. Oh, this is juicy exes working under the same roof. That's straight out of a rom-com. So what happened? Why'd you break up? Miles paused, her broom stilling as a memory surfaced. Kian standing in the rain outside her dorm, his eyes pleading as he asked her to try a long-distance relationship. She had been too afraid, too tethered to the safety of New York, to follow him to London. The pain of that decision lingered, a quiet ache she had buried beneath her new life. It didn't work out, she said, her voice tinged with regret. He had his dreams and I had mine. Sometimes that's all there is to it. Bella tilted her head, her expression softening. But you're here now in his house. Maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe it's a chance to rewrite the story. Miles's laugh was soft, bittersweet. You're a romantic, Bella. But I'm just trying to keep my head above water. I don't have time for stories. But Bella's words lingered, planting a seed of possibility in Miles's heart. She resumed, sweeping her thoughts, drifting to the journal she kept hidden in her room. Each night, she poured her soul onto its pages, writing of the strength she was discovering, the pride she was reclaiming. I am not defined by what I've lost. She had written it the night before. I am defined by what I choose to build. The words were a mantra, a beacon guiding her through the uncertainty. As the days unfolded, Miles found a rhythm in her work, a quiet satisfaction in the order she created. She learned to anticipate Regina's expectations, navigate the staff's dynamics, and find joy in small victories, a perfectly polished mirror, and a guest's grateful smile. But Kian remained a constant challenge, his presence a reminder of a life she had once dared to dream. He joined her one afternoon in the library where she was dusting the shelves, his voice a warm intrusion. You're getting good at this, he said, leaning against a bookcase, his eyes tracing her movements. You make dusting look like an art form. Miles rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. Flattery won't get you anywhere, Kian. I'm just doing my job. He grinned, undeterred. Maybe I just like watching you work. You've got this grace, you know, like you're dancing even when you're holding a rag. Her heart fluttered, but she pushed the feeling down, focusing on the books. Go find someone to charm, she said, her tone playful but firm. I've got enough on my plate. But Kian didn't leave. He stayed, helping her rearrange the books, his laughter filling the room as they reminisced about their college days, late-night study sessions, stolen kisses in the library stacks. For a moment, Miles let herself forget the weight of her new life and be the girl she had once loved without fear. But when their hands brushed, the spark was too much, and she pulled away, her walls rising again. That night, in the quiet of her room, Miles opened her journal, her pen hovering over the page. She wrote of Kian, of the way his smile stirred memories she thought she had buried. He sees me, she wrote, but can I trust what I feel? Can I trust him not to break me again? The question lingered unanswered as she closed the book and gazed out at the moonlit gardens. The mansion was her world now, a place of both confinement and possibility, and she was determined to find her place within it. The Hidalgo mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut shimmered under the velvet cloak of an autumn evening, its grand ballroom transformed into a cathedral of light and luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across the polished floors, their glow mingling with the soft strains of a jazz quartet, a melody that wove through the air like a lover's whisper. The guests, draped in silks and tuxedos, moved with the effortless grace of New York's elite, their laughter a symphony of privilege. Yet in the shadows of this opulent scene, Miles Ferrer stood a solitary figure, in a black and white uniform, her tray of champagne flutes, a quiet testament to her new reality. Miles's ebony skin glowed under the chandelier's light, her eyes deep pools of resilience and quiet sorrow, scanning the room with a practiced calm. Her uniform, though simple, clung to her with a dignity that no one could strip away. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of her work, finding solace in the small acts of service that anchored her to this strange new world. But tonight, the air was heavy with anticipation, a current of unease that tugged at her heart. She felt the weight of her past, the echoes of her family's rejection, and the fragile hope kindled by Kian Hidalgo's persistent kindness. As she moved through the crowd offering drinks with a polite smile, her thoughts drifted to the journal she kept hidden in her room. Last night, she had written of the mansion, its beauty, and its burdens, and of Kian, whose presence was both a comfort and a complication. "He sees me," she had written. "But what does it mean to be seen when I'm still finding myself?" The question lingered unanswered as she navigated the sea of guests, her tray a shield against the world she once belonged to. The ballroom doors swung open, and a hush fell over the crowd. Miles's heart stopped as she saw them, her family, the Ferrers, stepping into the room like specters from a life she had tried to forget. Jenna, her mother, was a vision of elegance in a sapphire gown, her smile polished but cold. Manuel, her father, stood beside her, his face a mask of stoic reserve. And Celine, her sister, was a blaze of crimson, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes glinting with a malice that sent a chill down Miles's spine. Miles's hands tightened around the tray, the glass flutes trembling slightly. She stepped back, hoping to blend into the shadows, but Celine's gaze found her sharp and unrelenting. "Miles?" Celine's voice cut through the crowd's murmurs loud enough to turn heads. "Is that you?" The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thick with scrutiny. Miles felt the weight of every eye, the whispers of the guests, and a soft roar in her ears. She straightened her chin, lifting with a defiance born of necessity. "Yes, it's me," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "I work here." Celine's laugh was a cruel melody, her wine glass glinting as she stepped closer. "Work here? Oh, this is rich. Miles Ferrer, Manhattan's golden girl, serves drinks in a maid's uniform. How the mighty have fallen." The words were a blade slicing through Miles's carefully constructed armor. She felt the sting of humiliation, the weight of her family's betrayal crashing over her like a wave. But before she could respond, Celine continued, her voice rising to ensure every guest could hear. "Miles used to be one of us, classy, sophisticated, dripping in designer brands. Now look at her scrubbing floors in her ex-boyfriend's house. Isn't that poetic?" The crowd murmured, some guests exchanging glances, others stifling laughter. Miles's cheeks burned, but she refused to look away. Her eyes locked on Celine's. "Enough, Celine," she said, her voice low but firm. "This isn't the place." But Celine was relentless, her smile venomous. "Oh, come on, dear sister. Don't you want everyone to know how pathetic you've become? You were always the star, weren't you? Always so perfect. But now you're nothing." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Miles's tray trembled, and in a moment of reckless cruelty, Celine reached out, tipping her wine glass. The red liquid splashed across Miles's uniform, staining the crisp white fabric, a scarlet mark of her sister's disdain. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but no one moved to intervene. Miles stood frozen, the wine dripping down her chest, her heart a storm of pain and fury. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and escape the weight of their judgment. But then a voice cut through the chaos, strong and unwavering. "That's enough. Kian Hidalgo, emerged from the crowd, his blonde hair catching the chandelier's light, his blue eyes blazing with a quiet fury. He was a vision in a tailored black tuxedo, his presence commanding the room's attention. He stepped between Miles and Celine, his gaze fixed on the younger sister. "Watch your words, Celine," he said, his voice low but lethal. "The only pathetic person here is you." The crowd fell silent, the jazz quartet pausing mid-note. Celine's eyes widened, her confidence faltering. "You're defending her." She spat, her voice trembling. "She's your ex, Kian. Of course you'd take her side." Kian's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I'm not defending her because of our past. I'm defending her because she deserves it. Miles is strong, honest, and works harder than anyone in this room. Conversely, you seem to enjoy tearing others down to feel better about yourself." Miles's breath caught her heart swelling with gratitude and disbelief. She felt the warmth of Kian's hand as he took the tray from her, setting it aside with a gentleness that contrasted with the fire in his eyes. "Miles is worth more than your cruelty," he continued, his voice softening as he turned to her. "And she's worth more than you'll ever understand." Celine's face flushed, her hands trembling as she clutched her glass. Before she could retort, Jenna stepped forward, her expression a mix of embarrassment and authority. "Celine, that's enough," she said, her voice sharp as she pulled her daughter back. Manuel followed, bowed head, offering a quiet apology to the crowd before leading his family away. Miles stood rooted to the spot, her uniform stained, her heart pounding. Kian's hand brushed hers, a silent anchor in the storm. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft, his eyes searching hers. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But thank you, Kian, for standing up for me." He smiled, a slight reassuring curve of his lips. "Anytime, Miles. You don't deserve what they did to you." Miles felt a shift within her as the crowd resumed its chatter, as the jazz quartet picked up its melody. The humiliation still stung, but Kian's words, his unwavering support, were a lifeline. She excused herself, slipping to the veranda, where the cool night air kissed her skin. The stars above Greenwich twinkled, a reminder of the nights she and Kian had spent dreaming under the Manhattan sky. She closed her eyes, letting the memory wash over her. And for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope, a belief that she could rise above the pain of her past. The Hidalgo mansion was a sanctuary of quiet strength in the days following the gala, its halls bathed in the soft light of autumn's fading glow. Miles Ferrer moved through her tasks with a renewed sense of purpose, her hands steady as she polished the grand piano in the music room, her heart alight with a fire she hadn't felt in years. The wine-stained uniform was a distant memory, replaced by a crisp new one. But the memory of Kian's defense lingered, a warm ember in her chest. Her ebony skin glowed under the morning sun, and her eyes, deep and resolute, were reflecting a woman beginning to reclaim her story. The gala had been a turning point, a moment when the world had seen her not as a housekeeper, but as a woman of strength and dignity. Kian's words had been a shield, Regina Hidalgo's silent approval, a quiet affirmation, but the fire within Miles burned brightest. She had stood in the face of her family's cruelty, and though the wounds still ached, she felt a growing certainty that she was more than their rejection, more than the life she had lost. Her journal tucked beneath her pillow had become a sacred space, a canvas for her thoughts and dreams. Last night she had written of the gala, of the way Kian's voice had cut through the crowd, of the way her heart had soared despite the pain. "I am not invisible," she had scrawled, her pen pressing hard against the page. "I am Miles, and I am enough." The words were a vow, a promise to herself, that she would no longer let her family's shadow define her. But the past was a persistent ghost, and it found her again one crisp afternoon in the mansion's rose garden. Miles was trimming the blooms, her hands careful, as she shaped the vibrant petals, when Regina Hidalgo appeared, her presence as commanding as the estate itself. Regina's black dress was elegant, her eyes sharp but softened by a rare warmth. "Miles," she said, her voice steady, "we need to talk." Miles set down her shears, her heart quickening. She had grown accustomed to Regina's exacting standards, but her tone was different today, a weight suggesting this was no ordinary conversation. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron, her voice steady despite her nerves. Regina gestured to a nearby bench, and they sat, the roses framing them in a halo of crimson and white. "I've been watching you." Regina began, her eyes studying Miles with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and seen. "You're not what I expected when you arrived. I thought you'd be another spoiled girl, broken by a fall from grace. But you've surprised me, Miles. You've worked hard, kept your head high, even after what happened at the gala." Miles's breath caught her fingers twisting in her lap. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I didn't have a choice." Regina's lips curved into a faint smile. "That's where you're wrong. You had a choice to give up, to let your family's cruelty define you. But you chose to fight. And that's why I'm here." Miles's heart pounded, a mix of curiosity and apprehension swirling within her. "What do you mean?" Regina leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am expanding Hidalgo Events, our family's event planning division. I need a partner with vision, resilience, and a heart that doesn't break under pressure. I've heard the rumors, Miles, about your past, about the Ferrer's fall from grace. But I don't care about rumors. I care about what I see, and I see a woman who could lead with me." Miles's eyes widened, her mind reeling. "Me? Ma'am, I'm a housekeeper. I don't know anything about running a business anymore." Regina's laugh was low, warm. "You're more than a housekeeper, Miles. You're a woman who organized charity galas at Columbia, who spoke to crowds with a fire that could light up a room. You've been running my household with precision and grace. Don't tell me you can't handle this." Miles's throat tightened, a flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She thought of her old life, of the dreams she had buried when her family cast her out. The idea of stepping back into a world of leadership and creation was thrilling and terrifying. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why trust me after everything?" Regina's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability in her eyes. "Because I see myself in you, Miles. I built this empire from nothing against people who said I couldn't. I see that same fight in you. And I know you won't let me down." The words were a gift, a validation Miles hadn't realized she needed. She felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back, her resolve strengthening. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I'll try. I won't let you down." Regina nodded, her smile approving. "Good. We'll talk about the details tomorrow. For now, keep doing what you do best, being you." As Regina walked away, Miles sat in the garden, the roses swaying gently in the breeze. She felt a shift within her, a sense that she was no longer just surviving, but beginning to thrive. That evening, she found Kian in the library, his presence a quiet comfort as she dusted the shelves. He looked up from his book, his smile soft but knowing. "Heard about Mom's offer," he said, his voice warm. "You're going to be amazing, Miles." She paused, her cloth stilling on the wood. "I'm scared, Kian," she admitted, her voice raw. "What if I fail? What if I'm not enough?" He stood, crossing the room to stand beside her, his hand brushing hers. "You're enough, Miles. You always have been. And I'm here rooting for you every step of the way." The touch of his hand was a spark igniting a warmth she had tried to suppress. She looked into his eyes, seeing the boy she had loved, and the man who is choosing her now. Thank you, she whispered, her heart opening just a fraction a crack through which hope could seep. That night in her journal, Miles wrote of the garden, Regina's trust, and Kian's unwavering belief. She wrote that I am not my past, her pen flowing with a newfound certainty. I am Miles, and I am ready to rise. The words were a declaration, a promise to herself, that she would seize this chance, not just to rebuild her life, but to create one truly hers. The rolling hills of Westchester, New York, glowed under the soft embrace of a late summer sunrise. Their emerald slopes, a canvas for the dreams Miles Ferrer had begun to weave anew. 5 years had passed since the night of the gala at the Hidalgo mansion. 5 years since she had stood trembling under the weight of her family's cruelty, her heart buoyed by Kian Hidalgo's unwavering defense. Now she stood on the balcony of a charming colonial home, her arms cradling a 2-month-old daughter, her ebony skin radiant in the morning light. Her eyes, once shadowed by pain, now sparkled with a quiet joy, a testament to the life she had built from the ashes of her past. The home was a haven, its white clapboard walls and flower-lined porch a far cry from the cold opulence of the Ferrer penthouse in Manhattan. Inside, the air was warm with fresh coffee and baby powder, a melody of domesticity that wrapped Miles in a sense of belonging she had never known. Her daughter Lily slept soundly against her chest, her tiny breaths a rhythm that anchored Miles to the present. She gazed at the child, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it eclipsed the shadows of her former life. Kian stepped onto the balcony, his blonde hair tousled from a sleepless night, his blue eyes softened by the sight of his wife and daughter. He was a vision of quiet strength in a simple white shirt, his presence a steady warmth that had become Miles's anchor. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, the steam curling like a promise of comfort. "Morning, love," he said, his voice a gentle caress as he handed her a mug. "You look like you're carrying the whole world in your arms." Miles smiled, her lips curving with a tenderness reserved for him. "Just the best part of it," she replied, her gaze drifting to Lily. "She's perfect, Kian. Sometimes I can't believe she's ours." He leaned against the railing, his eyes tracing the lines of her face with a reverence that made her heart flutter. "She's got your fire," he said, his voice low, intimate. "I see it in her eyes, even when she's sleeping. She's going to be unstoppable just like her mom." Miles's laugh was soft, a melody that danced in the morning air. "And your charm, I hope. She'll need it to balance out my stubborn streak." Kian grinned, his hand brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "You say stubborn, I say fierce. It's what I've always loved about you, Miles. Even when folding sheets in my mom's house, you had this light. It's why I never gave up on you." The words stirred a vivid and warm memory of their college days at Columbia. They had been young, reckless, their love a wildfire that burned through Harlem's vibrant nights. She remembered a particular evening standing on a rooftop under a star-streaked sky, Kian's arms around her as they swayed to a jazz tune only they could hear. They had dreamed of a future together, but fear had driven a wedge between them. Her fear of losing him to the distance of London, his fear of letting go of his ambitions. The memory was a bittersweet ache and a reminder of how far they had come. "I was so scared back then," Miles admitted, her voice soft as she gazed at the horizon. "When you showed up in that laundry room, I thought you were just another ghost from my past. But you stayed, Kian. You saw me when I couldn't see myself." He moved closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, his touch a quiet promise. "I saw you because you were impossible to miss, Miles. Even when you were hurting, you shone. And I knew no matter how many times you pushed me away, I wasn't going anywhere." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I didn't make it easy for you," she said, her voice breaking. "But you kept showing up with coffee with daisies, with that ridiculous smile that made me want to believe in second chances." Kian's laugh was warm, a sound that wrapped her in comfort. "Worth every stubborn moment," he said, kissing her forehead. "You're my home, Miles. You and Lily. Always will be." The words were a balm, soothing the scars left by her family's rejection. 5 years ago she had walked away from the hospital, her heart shattered, but her resolve unbroken. She had chosen to cut ties with the Ferrers, to build a life free from their toxicity. The decision had been painful, but it had led her here to a home filled with love, to a career as a partner in Hidalgo events, where she orchestrated galas with the same passion she once brought to her college projects. Regina Hidalgo had become a mentor and a surrogate mother who saw Miles's potential and nurtured it, giving her a place in a family that valued her. As they stood on the balcony, the morning unfolding in soft hues of gold and pink, Miles felt a peace she had never known. She thought of the journal. She still kept its pages, now filled with stories of triumph rather than pain. "I am not my wounds," she had written last night. "I am the woman who healed them." The words were a testament to her journey, a reminder that she had chosen herself even when it meant walking alone. Kian's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and curious. "You ever think about them?" he asked, his gaze steady. "Your family, I mean. Do you ever wonder what they're doing?" Miles's smile faded, but only for a moment. She looked down at Lily, her daughter's peaceful face, a shield against the past. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice quiet, "but not the way I used to. I don't need their approval anymore, Kian. I have you, Lily Regina. I have a life that's mine." He nodded, his hand squeezing hers. "I'm proud of you, Miles, for choosing you, for choosing us." The words lingered, a vow that bound them closer. As the sun climbed higher, casting its warmth over Westchester, Miles felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by the promise of a future she had built with her hands. She was no longer the girl who had stood trembling in a hospital hallway, nor the housekeeper who had scrubbed floors to survive. She was Miles Ferrer, a woman who had found her light, and she would carry it forward unafraid. The autumn leaves of Westchester, New York, danced in the breeze, their crimson and gold hues a vibrant tapestry against the backdrop of a clear September sky. Miles Ferrer stood in the garden of her home, a quaint colonial nestled among the rolling hills, its white walls glowing in the afternoon light. She wore a simple white blouse and high-waisted slacks, her ebony skin radiant, her eyes a deep well of strength and serenity, reflecting a woman who had found her place in the world. Beside her, a long table was draped in white linen, adorned with wildflowers and flickering candles, a setting for a gathering that marked a new chapter in her life. The garden was alive with the hum of family and friends, their laughter and a melody waiting through the air like a celebration song. Kian Hidalgo. Her husband moved among the guests, his blonde hair catching the sunlight, his blue eyes sparkling with pride as he played host. Their daughter Lily, now a giggling toddler, chased a butterfly through the grass, her tiny hands reaching for the sky. The scene portrayed joy, starkly contrasting the pain that had once defined Miles's world. 5 years had passed since the gala, since Regina Hidalgo had named Miles her partner in Hidalgo events, a decision that had transformed her life. She had thrown herself into the work, orchestrating events with a passion that rivaled her college days, her vision breathing life into every detail. The business had flourished under her touch. With it, her confidence had grown, a quiet fire that burned brighter with each success. But this home, this family anchored her most deeply, a sanctuary built on love, trust, and the courage to let go of the past. As Miles arranged a tray of desserts, her thoughts drifted to the journal that had been her companion through the darkest days. Its pages were now a chronicle of triumph, filled with entries of love and laughter of moments like this one, where the world felt whole. "I am not my pain," she had written the night before. "I am the woman who chose peace." The words were a beacon guiding her through the quiet moments when the past threatened to resurface. The gathering was Regina's idea, a celebration to welcome Miles officially into the Hidalgo family, not just as Kian's wife, but as a partner, a leader, a woman who had earned her place. The guests were a mix of Hidalgo relatives and business associates, their faces warm with admiration as they toasted to Miles's success. Regina, resplendent in a white jumpsuit, took the center of the garden, her voice commanding, yet warm as she raised a glass. "To Miles Ferrer," she said, her eyes locking with Miles's. "A woman who turned adversity into strength, showed us that true elegance lies in the heart." Miles's throat tightened, her heart swelling with gratitude. She stepped forward, her voice steady but soft, a melody of resolve and grace. "Thank you, Regina." She began, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "5 years ago, I stood in a hospital hallway. My world shattered. My family, my mother, my father, my sister chose to see me as a failure, a burden. They cast me out, and for a long time I believed I was nothing." She paused, her eyes finding Kian's steady presence a lifeline. "But I learned something in these years. I learned that I am not defined by their rejection, nor by the life I lost. My choices define me to keep going, to build something new, to love and be loved. I chose to walk away from a family that couldn't see me, and in doing so, I found a family that does." The crowd was silent, their eyes fixed on her, drawn to the quiet power in her words. Miles's gaze softened as she watched Lily playing in the grass. "I chose peace," she continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not just for me, my daughter, and the life we're building. And I want to thank you, Regina, for believing in me, Kian, for never giving up, and all of you for welcoming me into this family." The applause was warm, a wave of affirmation that washed over her. Kian stepped to her side, his hand slipping into hers, his smile a promise of forever. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice a soft vow. "I'm so proud of you." Miles was drawn to the garden's edge as the guests mingled, where the roses bloomed in vibrant defiance of the coming autumn. Kian joined her, his presence a quiet comfort. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle, his eyes searching hers. She nodded, her smile soft but sure. "More than okay," she said, her voice a whisper of gratitude. "I used to think happiness was something I had to earn, something I had to prove I deserved. But standing here with you, with Lily, with this life, I know I've found it." Kian's hand tightened around hers, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. "You've always deserved it, Miles, and I'll spend every day making sure you know that." The words were a vow, a promise that echoed the love they had rebuilt. Miles thought of the letter she had written to her mother, Jenna, which she never sent. In it, she had poured out her forgiveness, her resolve to move forward without the weight of her family's judgment. "I forgive you," she had written, "but I choose me." The letter symbolized closure, a final farewell to the pain that had once defined her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Miles felt a peace that was hers alone. She was no longer the girl who had been cast out, nor the housekeeper who had scrubbed floors to survive. She was Miles Ferrer, a woman who had carved her own path and found love and purpose in the ruins of her past. And as she looked at Kian, Lily, and the family she had chosen, she knew she was home. Dear friends, thank you for joining Miles on her journey of resilience and love. Your support means the world to us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Reflect on Miles's story, your moments of triumph, or the dreams you're chasing. Comment below, tag us on social media, or join our community at insert platform link to keep the conversation going. Let's celebrate the strength in all of us together.